Ministers in charge of energy and environment from the group of 20 members have called for the creation of an international framework to tackle the problem of plastic waste polluting the oceans. The ministers made the appeal in a joint statement adopted at the end of their 2-hour meeting in the Japanese resort town of Karuizawa. The statement called for urgent action to address plastic ocean pollution, saying it was detrimental to the marine ecosystem and fishing and could harm human health as well. The ministers proposed setting up a framework for countries to regularly report their efforts to reduce plastic waste. Governments would give details of how they recycle plastic products and collect plastic garbage. On energy issues, the statement stresses the need for energy market stability and infrastructure that would ensure constant energy supplies. On measures to address global warming, the ministers called for steps to mitigate the damage from climate change. They also agreed to draw up a collection of action plans to help countries adopt effective measures. Japanese Environment Minister Yoshiaki Harada told reporters that the meeting achieved great results. Harada and Japan will make all-out efforts to unite the world in addressing environmental issues. Would an apology be enough to ease tensions in the city? Convener of the Civil Human Rights Front, Jimmy Sham, said Carrie Lam has only accepted people's opinions, but her attitude remains unchanged. He stressed what people truly want is a complete withdrawal of the amendment bill and demanded the CE step down. The lawmaker who joined the protest was not happy either. The protest started with a minute of silence to mourn the protester who fell to his death after slipping off some scaffolding outside Pacific Place Mall to petition against the bill. Protesters again flooded the Causeway Bay area as they marched from Victoria Park to the Legislative Council building. At around 6 p.m, protesters arrived in Admiralty and occupied Harcourt Road. Demonstrators also gave way for vehicles that were stuck. Some gathered at Lungwo Road near the Ledge Cove complex. A booth is in place to offer materials such as water, masks and umbrellas. Others stayed at the Ledge Coast demonstration area with balloons that read "No extradition to China." The central government's top representative in town met with local members of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. One of those who attended the meeting said they were told that Beijing fully supports the chief executive in her decision to suspend the extradition bill. A busy morning at the central government's liaison office. Local National People's Congress deputies and members of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference spent an hour with the liaison office's director Wang Zimin and all 7 deputy directors. After hearing that the central government fully supports the chief executive's decision to suspend the extradition bill, a CPPCC member had this to say. During the meeting, they were told that 4 central government departments, including the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office and the Foreign Ministry, issued statements voicing their support for Carrie Lam. It's something that's rare, the group said. The meeting also touched on who's to blame for Hong Kong's current situation. Attendees quoted Wang as saying foreign governments had issued at least 67 statements about the bill, and such interference had complicated the issue. Meanwhile, a Reuters report quoted a source in Beijing with ties to China's leadership as saying the Hong Kong administration had handled the saga badly. The report also said the central government now has severe doubts about Carrie Lam's capabilities. Hong Kong protesters were still on the streets this week seeking the ouster of government leader Carrie Lam and the scrapping of the extradition bill she postponed at the weekend. By daybreak, the masses that filled the streets had diminished, but those who remained were sticking to their demands. Protest organizers said almost 2 million people turned out to demand that Lam step down in what is becoming the most significant challenge to China's relationship with the territory since it was handed back by Britain 22 years ago. Hong Kong opposition politicians are echoing March's calls for both Lam and the law to go, even after she apologized for her government's handling of the bill, which would let suspects be sent to mainland China for trial for the first time. Crowd control measures were in place at several MTR stations to cope with the overwhelming number of passengers. A sea of black at Hong Kong Station. MTR staff had to divert the passengers. A similar situation in Admiralty. The interchange station was packed with people waiting to get on trains, even though the MTR had increased its train frequency. This man originally planned to board the train at Hong Kong Station, but it was so crowded there that he decided to go all the way to Mei Fu Station on the Kowloon side in order to reach Admiralty Station. A woman who came from Mong Kok Station said it took her half an hour to get on the train, but she stressed order was generally good. Some also chose to exit through Tin House Station to reach the starting point of the rally, Victoria Park. Some shops in the nearby area closed their doors for the day. The MTR is not the only one jam-packed with passengers. The Star ferry service from Sim Sha Sui to Wan Chai also saw an unusually long queue of people that went all the way to the Avenue of Stars. The father of a teenage Belgian backpacker missing in Australia for more than 2 weeks pleaded for help this week, saying his son could be in grave danger, as police called the disappearance baffling. Theo Hayez, 18, vanished after leaving the Cheeky Monkeys bar in Byron Bay, a holiday town 765 kilometres north of Sydney, late on May 31st. He has not been seen or heard of from since. Police notified of the disappearance on June 6th after Hayes failed to check out of his hostel and could not be found, said they had narrowed the search to 2 areas near the centre of Byron Bay based on his last telephone records. Hayes had been backpacking around Australia since November and was due to return to Belgium last week. Local media reported. Police said they had few clues and added that they had asked WhatsApp owner's Facebook to help, but it would be quicker if other group members provided access to the messages. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno has blocked the extradition to the United States of a New York man charged with trying to defraud Facebook Inc. founder Mark Zuckerberg, a document obtained by Reuters showed on June 7th. Moreno wrote in the June 4th document that he was denying the extradition of Paul Siglia, who spent nearly 3.5 years as a fugitive before being arrested in Ecuador last year for humanitarian and reciprocity reasons. An Ecuadorian court authorized the extradition of Siglia, a wood pellet salesman from Wellsville in upstate New York, in November 2018. Siglia claimed in a 2010 suit that Zuckerberg had, while a student at Harvard University, signed a contract giving him half of a planned social networking website that later would become Facebook. A U.S. district judge dismissed Siglia's lawsuit after another judge said the contract was doctored. Siglia was criminally charged with mail and wire fraud in November 2012 and fled less than 2 months before his scheduled 2015 trial, removing his electronic ankle bracelet and disappearing with his wife, 2 children, and a dog. The president of Uruguay's government-owned utility UTE said the massive power failure that began in Argentina and left tens of millions in South America without power would be an opportunity to improve the country's power systems. Speaking at a news conference in Montevideo, UTE head Gonzalo Casaravilla said this instance was going to be an opportunity because it placed their entire system at the same time in a situation that will definitely allow them to draw conclusions from. Argentina's grid collapsed around 7 a.m. local time, leaving the entire country without power and cutting electricity to much of neighboring Uruguay and swaths of Paraguay as well. Energy distributors to Argentina, Paraguay and Uruguay, whose populations total near 55 million, said power was being quickly restored to major cities and heavily populated coastal regions, including Montevideo and Buenos Aires. UTE said it had restored power to 75% of the country by 1:30 p.m. local time. It told its customers in a statement that there existed no other examples of such events like this in recent years. Representatives from 23 member countries have started a new round of cooperation, determining to follow on the path of exchange and mutual learning in film culture through common consultation, common efforts of building and sharing. It was announced by the Belt and Road Film Festival Alliance at a press conference. Since the founding of the alliance last year, all members have been actively engaging in exchange and cooperation, and the Shanghai International Film Festival has also recommended a number of new films to participate in competitions and exhibitions of all member film festivals. At the Belt and Road Film Week of the 22nd Shanghai International Film Festival, member states recommended 24 latest films. The 22nd Shanghai International Film Festival, SIFF, or SIFF, will have such activities as an opening ceremony, a film week, forums and exhibitions. A total of 3,964 films from 112 countries and regions have been registered for this year's event, and more than 500 of them will be screened in 47 cinemas across the city. Founded in 1993, the SIFF is a competitive global event driven by Shanghai's efforts to become an international cultural hub. Rescuers evacuated dozens of people from a flooded village in Qingzhou City, South China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Rainstorms hit the village and resulted in rising of water levels of a water channel. Surging flood waters poured into the village and then inundated many houses. The water depth in some areas reached more than 2 meters. Some villagers, including babies, children and elders, were trapped by the flood. Firefighters rushed to the site and took rubber boats to reach the trapped people. After more than half an hour, all the people were transferred to safe places. The rain has since weakened, but it still continues to fall. The Qinghai Tibet Plateau Wild Zoo in northwest China's Qinghai province opened the doors to the new Panda house recently, with the public flocking to snag a quick shot of the cuddly animals. 4 giant pandas who were transported to the zoo from the Chengdu Research Base of Giant Panda Breeding, located in southwest China's Sichuan province earlier this month, became the first pandas to settle down in the plateau city. The debut of the pandas, named Hexing, Yuanman, Shuangxin and Qigyu, attracted crowds of locals and tourists. The Panda house was packed with passionate panda fans, and many snapped photos from behind the thick glass window of the pandas who were chomping on bamboo and tumbling in the grass. To allow the pandas to adapt to the new climate and environment of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, the zoo had arranged individual outdoor and indoor spaces and a rest area for each panda. A 30-square-meter room for fresh bamboo storage had also been built in the Panda house. To ensure the freshness of the bamboo, all the bamboo is transported to the zoo regularly by air. The zoo will also conduct physical checks for the pandas every month. Qinghai Province will launch a series of education activities about giant pandas over the next 3 years. A determined amputee student in southwest China's Yunnan province has been widely hailed for his bravery and garnered online fame after he waved off an exemption to complete a series of physical tests and sports challenges last month. The inspiring 17-year-old Gao Yaneng, who lives in Kujing City, had been allowed to sit out the physical test on April 24th on the grounds of his disability. Gao lost his right leg at the age of 6 after falling from the roof of his house, but his persistence drove him to take the test in order to get a better mark, as well as to prove his own steely resolve. The bold youngster sought to join his classmates in the challenges, which included a sequence of sit-ups, pull-ups, participation in a volleyball game, and even a 1,000-meter run. Though he was able to complete the other items successfully and obtain full marks, it was the kilometer-long run which proved to be the most grueling challenge for Gao, who tackled the track on his crutches. At the beginning, Gao fell behind and gradually dropped further away from the other students. But the formidable student finally completed the run in an astonishing time of 4 minutes, 36 seconds, accompanied across the finish line to huge cheers from his impressed teachers and adoring classmates. The awe-inspiring video of the race and Gao's unrelenting run has also gone viral across China, winning the young man much acclaim and fame on the internet. Just recently, Riza Ali, an 18-year-old from Indian-controlled Kashmir, was forced to abandon an attempt to climb Everest after his Sherpa, who was working for a Nepalese company, failed to carry enough oxygen for the summit. Ali was lucky that he managed to resist the temptation of going up instead of coming down and survived. But many others have had a different fate at the world's highest peak this season. Inexperienced guides were unable to cope with a massive traffic jam of climbers near the peak, Ali said, a result of the Nepalese government issuing a record 381 permits to climb Everest this year. Indian climbers in the Himalayas are booming in number, but are especially at risk from budget expeditions, according to climbers, trekking companies and officials. 4 Indians have already died in separate incidents on Everest this year, behind only in 1985, when 5 Indian Army soldiers were killed on an expedition. Nepal's tourism department issued Everest permits to a record 78 Indian climbers in 2019, up from 59 in 2018. Indians now make up the largest group of permit holders, overtaking American citizens this year. 9 people have died on the Nepalese side of the mountain so far this year, the deadliest climbing season on the peak since 2015. That is becoming an embarrassment for a Nepalese government that is facing increasing criticism over how it issues permits and regulates trekking companies. For decades, expeditions to Everest and Nepal's other 8,000ers, a small group of difficult peaks above 8,000 meters beloved of mountaineers, were dominated by foreign-run companies. Then, avalanches in 2012 and 2014 killed several local mountain guides known as Sherpas, fueling anger at what was seen as the excessive profits of Western companies, according to Alan Arnett, a veteran mountaineer who has long chronicled deaths on Everest. Local firms moved in aggressively, offering packages that undercut foreign rivals by half. A Nepalese company charges around $35,000 for a trek to the summit of Everest, compared to $70,000 and higher for a foreign company, according to several tour operators. To be sure, the pitfalls of cheaper companies, from a lack of oxygen cylinders to cooks being passed off as experienced guides, can befall mountaineers from any country. But cheaper firms are especially attractive to Indians who tend to be more cost-conscious and often lack the independent wealth of Western and Far Eastern clients, several trekking companies have said. Despite the recent deaths, the increasing glamour of Everest, buoyed by social media and the promise of instant fame, is alarming experienced mountaineers in India. As for Ali, the 18-year-old from Kashmir, a real sense of proportion has set in. After being told about the lack of oxygen on Everest, he came back down the mountain in tears. Those handmade products are not silk or paper lotus, but real lotus. However, instead of lasting for just a few days like the fresh lotus, they can retain their vivid colors and fragrance for years. So how can they last such a long time? And how are those lotus flowers, leaves and stems used to make such delicate decorations and souvenirs? Dong Thap province is the most famous locality for lotus in Vietnam. Cherishing the idea of introducing the beauty of his home province's flower to the world, Ngo Chi Kong has devoted his efforts to maintaining the flower's color and fragrance in its dried form. Founder Khoi Min Tan Kong Company says it requires careful precision in processing lotus flowers to dry them. This is because the lotus stem is weak and the petals are soft. It is also more difficult to process and preserve its color and the other characteristics than other kinds of flowers. In order to ensure the best quality of lotus, flowers are picked in the early morning. From flower baskets, flower vases and decorative boards to the Vietnamese traditional conical hat, dried lotus flowers and leaves are applied in various decorative items and daily items. No matter what purposes dried lotuses are used for, it requires the patience and meticulousness of craftsmen, as dried lotus petals, leaves or stems are easily torn or broken. After leaves are dried, the area around their petiole is brittle and easily torn. Lotus is a species of nature. It has its own petal structure. Each flower has a different blooming level and petal organization. Craftsmen must know and see how a fresh flower looks like in order to attach dried parts together to make the flower look like a fresh one. Thanks to the innovative ideas and skillful hands of these people, the beauty of lotus is preserved beyond time. The soul of the flower itself and of Vietnam is promoted both in the country and across the border.